Great, thanks very much, everyone. It's great to be here, and a really interesting sort of set of presentations, I think. Some really concrete, stimulating, varied ideas. And thanks also, Karen, for the unexpected name check earlier. But I do have to say, I mean, the FT, as I hope you know, is really interested and does try to report on a lot of these issues around disease and global health around the world. And indeed, we will be producing, for your information, both a magazine on neglected tropical diseases, which will come out just at the time of the big Geneva, slightly post 5-year anniversary this April. We're also about to launch, incidentally, a weekly newsletter around FT Health, which will focus and distill and highlight interesting articles around health and global health issues. So without further ado, I think we want to, if there are two key lessons about communication, one is get the technology right, and this wouldn't be the only session where there can be some frustrations with that, but I think we got some great images. But the other thing is to be succinct, and we won't go on too long, because I think it's, you're probably all keen to kind of network and have some coffee and so on, but we'll try to go for about 15 minutes or so. I'm going to throw out a couple of questions to the panel, but then really open it up to you for reactions, comments, and so on briefly. So let me begin just by asking, and I won't pick on anyone particular straight away, but I will if you don't answer. So we've heard some great examples of good practice and things that have seemed to have gone well for you individually as organizations. Perhaps you could express some of your frustrations, the failures, the challenges, the missing bits that you have difficulty getting to. Who might like to come in on that initially? Go on.
I can comment. Is this on, or do I?
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Is it voice activated? Yeah, I mean, at the risk of sounding like I'm whining, and I don't want to do that, or whinging, or whatever the right word is, I started out by saying that as a medical journalist, I thought the pharmaceutical industry was the Antichrist. And I really did believe that, actually. And there has been a lot of bad behavior by the pharmaceutical industry. There's no doubt about it. There's a book called Bad Pharma, which is well documented, in fact. I think one of the biggest challenges to trying to change a business model to get innovative drugs and vaccines out to markets which aren't traditionally the markets that are the target markets for a profit industry. I think one of the biggest challenges has certainly been that we are not seen as really the right, ones to do that, because we are profit seeking. And somehow there is this bad word, profit has become, and which is why I alluded to your title, which I really think that in order for public health to be sustainable, and for solutions to public health to be sustainable, I think we do need to find models to make good public health practice profitable. And when I say profitable, I don't just mean money coming back to an industry and big salaries and nice cars and holidays and all the things that are associated with the pharmaceutical industry. I mean profitable also because vaccines actually are very cost-effective. They're a cost-effective way to address the diseases, many of the infectious diseases that are emerging and spreading in our world today. They're a good investment, but they require investment. They require governments to prioritize infrastructure, capacity building, sustainable systems for delivering vaccines, old and new, for making sure that you find ways to increase access and reach the people who aren't currently getting the vaccines that they need. And it requires also for us not to wait for the perfect vaccine. Because I'm here to tell you that the diseases that exist today, the ones that we're tackling today, the dengues, the malarias, the Zikas, these are going to be very complex vaccines if we are even able to succeed. It took over half a century to bring a dengue vaccine to the world. Not for lack of triers, right? Sure. So I know I'm taking a very long time, but it's my soapbox. But so I think that we need to stop expecting that we should wait for a magic bullet and that it should be given to us for free. I think we need to start investing in systems which allow us to make the right priorities with the limited government funds that we have, to actually increase public health, which will increase growth and productivity and prosperity. And in the end, I would like to think of it as a win-win.
Okay, but just kind of going back, and maybe Claudia perhaps, I don't know if that resonates in terms of the corporate side from Merck. Obviously, dengue and Sanofi is at least a semi-commercial enterprise. Merck's donations obviously rather more purely philanthropic, but do you face some of those same tensions and difficulties of being, of the corporate face, as it were, of global health?
Absolutely. I mean, I absolutely share what Karen has said. I was discussing before and sharing the main challenge. When industry enter into this arena, there is, I had the impression that there is one perception that we are there, but we need to give money. So what the academia and the rest of the organization expect from partnering with industry is cash. So we need to fund. In the case of Merck, and I'm talking for the Global Health Institute, an organization that, by the way, is currently being structured into Merck, we are trying to find new financial mechanism, because that's just to share with everybody, the same company, Merck itself, is not giving much funds to global health. So they expect to find alternative solutions and approaches that would allow, yes, to have certain benefits, but probably to have benefits that goes beyond the cash. So the effects that the company is expecting is more in a kind of halo effect on footprint, on reputation, but that's very difficult to be measured. So it's where I seek some help into the community to change a bit the perception towards the industry, because that would be very, very important to partner more and more and more to be successful. So that's my perception.
Okay, thank you. Let me just do Matthew, maybe the final corporate, as it were, and then we'll go more to the partnership or the blended models, as it were. So frustrations around communication and the role, indeed, of the corporate in that.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely, when we go out and do community engagement, there's definitely that sense you get from some people, a sense of maybe mistrust because you're representing a corporation, I suppose, and it's something you have to overcome in community engagement you do. Something else I alluded to maybe in my talk was the kind of baggage that genetic engineering has. And something that personally, as a scientist, I find a little bit frustrating is, as we know in our kind of age of alternative facts, if you try and just kind of give the science, give the facts, it doesn't always work. It can actually be quite polarizing. So something I've had to learn personally is how to kind of empathize more with people and not just respond with facts and science, but kind of learning to listen and see things from their perspective and find common ground, basically, in engagement.
Okay, Jaya, in your red, not your pink scarf. Or is it pink?
Okay, so I'd like to just come in because Claudia and Karen have spoken with their pharmaceutical hats on, and we at MMV are, as I described with my tree, we are a blended model. We are a public-private partnership that produces products that we then have to actually raise funds to produce. So we don't see the pharmaceutical industry as the bad boys. We see them as essential to the production of new medicines. I mean, where would we be without pharma? I mean, it's very clear. But we also see that on their own, they were not doing much for neglected diseases. And that's why an organization like Medicines for Malaria Venture was created, because of this gap that, that people in pharma were reluctant to bridge. There was no money in it. perfectly understandable. And in the year 2000, when things, there was a shift in the landscape because people realized, the world realized, international organizations realized that we need to change this somehow. And it's organizations like DNDi, like FIND, like MMV, that have managed to bridge that gap by bringing these two enormously important partners in R&D together to create new medicines that are affordable. Again, we're talking poverty, we're talking SDGs, we're talking poverty-related diseases here. This isn't just, something that happens to rich people. It doesn't. So we have to have affordable medicines. The pharmaceutical, we work with both Merck, we work with Sanofi, and we will continue to do so because they are essential to the R&D process. But coming back, sorry, that was just my comment on
frustrations.
My frustrations.
Okay,
the frustrations you heard from my presentation. Actually, it's so difficult to make R&D a good sell because it's people are like R&D white coats. Who's interested there? So we really try to make that more palatable, more interesting. I hate to use the word sexy because that's not what it's about. It's just to attract attention, to say this is an important area of work that we are involved in. So yeah, that's the difficult bit. We really struggle with that, but we succeed in bits. We don't in others, but that's the way it is. Yeah. Thank you.
James, so again, kind of bits maybe you aren't touching. I mean, you talked about getting to donors, but also the kind of the in-country government messaging and so on. But are there other communities you think you need to get to that you're not, and challenges around that?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that the N Fund has been successful at, but then sometimes it seems like there is a bit of a ceiling, can be bringing in new partners who maybe have never even funded global health at all. So it was mentioned in one of the presentations that we need to show that neglected tropical diseases are a best buy in public health. So I think it's finding what will make people actually believe that. And so, because there's only so much government funding that can be had, there's only so many people who are already funding global health. So it's really trying to get out there and find those people who maybe are only funding national programs and really trying to sell NTDs as a best buy in public health and something that is something you should invest in that has a return on investment. So are you trying to get to their minds, their hearts, their wallets? So I think it's really finding what that specific thing is to get new people on board, because there's only so much money that exists already with the partners that we have.
And Lois, I mean, so you're the one on the panel apart from me who's kind of, as it were, from the journalistic world directly. I mean, what are your impressions about how good some of the communication is and what the missing bits are for others, but also in what the work of the Trust is doing? Who isn't being reached and why? What more could be done to get to them?
I think the challenge, that, as I see it right now, from particularly the kind of the communication for health type world, is around communicating impact and results and levels of standards of evaluation in communication work specifically. And I think there's a number of elements to that, which is that trying to establish an evidence base, which there are ongoing conversations about what does success look like. Also, there are great gains being made in this area, and we're going to hear a little bit about it this afternoon from MTV and DMI. But trying to kind of prove again and again that communication works is a sap on resources, I think, and possibly, but not to say that activities are not welcomed, and they really are. But so just have the argument won, so that donors are, more willing to invest in communication, basically. There's a second element, which is trying to convince scientists that qualitative research is evidence. When we're talking about human beings, it clearly has a role to play. So yeah, those are some of the challenges. I mean, I'm a researcher, so that's probably my view on it.
No, but it's a really interesting thing. I was thinking, even as you talked about your results, because there's still quite a lot in there that's as it were, process indicators in
Oh,
terms
yeah,
of,
yeah.
I mean, and we all know how complex and difficult behaviour change is, but, of course, what we really want is to be able to say, has there been a reduction in HIV, for example, as a result of, sexual reproductive health, radio discussions?
That's what's so exciting about DMI's work this afternoon. I'm looking forward to
Okay,
it.
so you hope to learn some more from that, yeah. But are there still some missing pieces, if I could put it this way, in the infrastructure, the sharing that would allow for a better, architecture to understand and to structure impact around campaigns that could really deliver better results or better point to results more effectively?
What do you mean?
So is there some, is there need for more coordination between there? Is there a kind of missing layer of, implementation science? Is there some, model for how better to evaluate communication campaigns that really looks at end results?
I think those activities are happening, yeah, they're in process. And to be honest, partnerships has got to be the way forward so that we're not all duplicating effort and working in isolation, for sure.
Yeah. And Thoko, maybe a few thoughts. Obviously, the scorecard's a really interesting way to kind of quite simply but tangibly track and hold to account. But again, from your perspective, any thoughts on, communities you're not reaching, people that a lot of this work doesn't seem to resonate with, and what might be useful next steps?
I think for us, it's just really when you're engaging with politicians and you're looking at our 2020 goals and you're looking at the language that we use. It's English language, so when you use the word eliminate to a politician, they understand something different. And when you're talking about public health and elimination from a public health point of view. So I think with us, when we're really thinking about our 2020 goals, really trying to communicate to these groups about what do we actually mean when we're talking about elimination as a public health problem with some of these diseases. That I think is where we really need the communications folks in this room to help us with that, because we don't want people to be disappointed in saying that we haven't met our 2020 goals because they were expecting elimination to mean something else. So how do we really work with these groups to explain what will 2020 look like? Because in the English language, if you use the word eliminate, somebody says it's completely gone. And then you add the word eradicate, it even adds another complication. It's like, okay, elimination, eradication. So I think this is really the issue that we need to be thinking about in terms of, and I think this is why this is so fantastic, this session, and looking at communication and neglected tropical diseases, because even the names of some of these diseases that we talk about, they are not very accessible to a lot of people. So our language is very, the way in which we communicate is very internal to the people who work in the community. So how can we help? How can the communications folks and the communications brains and the creative folks around this place help us to reach to those audiences and be able to explain more clearly what we mean by our different terminology?
Okay, thanks. So we've got a few minutes. Anyone got some questions? I see one there. Any other hands are going up? We've probably got about 5 minutes. But David, yeah, please.
Thanks. Actually, I want to pick up on, ask James a point, because you have successes in Rwanda and Burundi. Clearly, where NFund are working in the countries like DRC and Burundi, how much have you been able to get the minister to articulate these successes? Because for me, the critical thing in the countries is convincing ministers that this is a good buy, and the health budget, the proportionality of the health budget for NTDs has got to rise. Because the point I've tried to make is the countries are getting free essential drugs that they would otherwise have to buy, and they're dropped on their doorstep. And I think that getting across the fact that they have an obligation, because I think we can hear from people like Merck, there's not the uptake of the drugs. Certainly, praziquantel, I don't think there's 100% uptake of the available product. I don't think there's 100% uptake of mebendazole and albendazole for the STH programs. So that's a concern. One thing I think we've missed as a problem area, and this comes back to, I know Sanofi's involvement in this, antivenoms for snake bite. 100,000 people a year are dying of snake bite. WHO have lopped off snake bite from the NTD list. Grossly neglected problem. I think pharma needs to look at its position in relation to that, because Sanofi have withdrawn Favafrique, a polyvalent antivenom for snake bite in Africa. I think that's a tragedy, although I think there's a commercial decision. I think that should be on the radar screen. And thanks again.
Okay. Nobody else do you want to come back up?
Yeah, sure. So you had asked about kind of how do you get the government or ministries of health to see that it is a best buy and that they should be putting more resources towards it. So I think my colleagues on the program side would say that it takes time and a lot of advocacy on their end. They do travel a lot and work with the governments. But in the Burundi film, actually, the Minister of Health at that time, she was talking about how she would like Burundi to be able to be an example for other countries. And off camera, she was talking to us a little bit about how if she could get other ministers of health to see what a difference it had made in Burundi, that would be successful to her. So there's things like the meetings of the African Union bringing together the ministers of health. So I think you need to find those champions who are the ministers of health at that time in Burundi. In the local, in South Kivu, the Minister of Health there, he had a personal story about a childhood friend of his dying of schistosomiasis, so we had a very personal connection. And so I think if you find some of those champions within the ministries of health we've been working with for many years, since 2008, 7, 12, and then getting them to show their colleagues on their same level that, hey, this has impacted the people in our country positively. We've seen the economic return. And so I think at that level is where you're going to see a difference of them speaking to other ministers as colleagues almost.
Okay. Conscious of time, yeah, please, on that.
Hi, Julie Jacobson from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. This panel was about complexity and communicating complexity in the NTD space and trying to overcome that. And I think it's really interesting because when you look at what was on the panel, we have vaccines, we have genetically modified mosquitoes, we have films for behavior change, we've got a scorecard, we've got, and we have Merck, we got a whole bunch of confusing. And I'm just wondering if you guys, in listening to each other and thinking about this subject as what you were trying to work on and help us think about, how do we be sure we're not tripping over each other in our own messages and creating confusions with eliminate, those pieces, because it is very complex, but I think there's a compelling piece here that there can be something done. How do we have that piece come through as a theme through that complexity?
Mm-hmm. You want to give it a go?
Oh, that's a tough one. I mean, that's like the $1 million question, isn't it?
That's why I asked.
Yeah. You're looking to get the million, or or to give it. What can I say? Wow. I mean, I think there is something called shared value, and I think it is something that we could maybe use as a common denominator. If we could find better ways of finding issues that we all have a role in contributing to, where there is a shared value creation, where it's not just profit on one side and taking advantage on the other. I mean, I do believe that is what's sustainable. If you can find something where people can see what's in it for me, and I'm not talking just profits, I'm talking good, protection of health, I'm talking politically savvy decision making. If we could work with, I don't know, Michael Porter, I mean, people of the world who are really trying to find projects where people can contribute. Again, where pharma isn't seen as just deep pockets. Pharma has a lot more to bring to the table than just deep pockets. A lot of expertise, a lot of infrastructure and capacity building, a lot of, logistics. Producing and supplying vaccines to the world is a major logistical enterprise. And these, at Coca-Cola, I think the brand was mentioned here before, this is a fantastic distributor. I mean, you go anywhere in the world. I mean, rural Madagascar, where I was a Peace Corps volunteer, out in the village, you find Coca-Cola. So I think there must be ways. Is that kind of disruptive innovation going to come from my industry? Perhaps not, because we're so highly regulated that we're really limited, I think, in some ways, on how innovative we can really be when it goes beyond R&D. But partnering with others, I mean, the fantastic creativity that we've seen around the table here, BBC, we know. I mean, I don't know, Bill and Melinda Gates, could you guys form a foundation where we can meet and where we can bring something to the table against a common objective?
Anybody else want to come in?
Yes, actually, that's a very interesting thing to think about, because thanks very much, Karen, because what you were saying is right. Yet the question, I feel, is, are we getting our messages right here? We're all talking about different things, and yet it was given to us as a topic, a theme, and we all saw it differently. So I think what you're asking is, how do we come and see things in a similar way so that we can then together move forward and not, scattered kind of, oh, you're going there and I'm going there. Yeah, maybe this is the first step. Maybe you come here in this kind of a forum and lay down your problems and say, do you have a problem like this? Can we go together? I mean, yes, eliminate, eradicate. We have that problem at MMP. It's like, eliminate malaria, and then Melinda Gates says, we're going to eradicate malaria, and then it's like, oh, okay, we're going to eradicate. No, WHO says that is an impossibility. How can you eradicate malaria? So, we get squeezed in the middle saying, okay, they're both people we want to work with. What are we going to say? So we've come with, I think, if I'm right, we say elimination is kind of within a national boundary, and eradication is the whole world. That's how we see it. And that's the way we explain these two terms, just so that we don't go completely crazy with, okay, how do we define this? But it's an important issue, Cameron has to just pull us all together again so we can just, hash these issues out and say, let's get this started in that, let's not trip over each other's feet and move forward as one body. Thank you. That was a very interesting question.
Unless anybody who's got a burning answer, I'm getting threatened to be dragged off stage in a second. I would just say, certainly, I mean, The Economist has this style book, and the message from them is simplify then exaggerate. And I wouldn't want, of course, yes, truth and science, evidence-based information, but also, keep it tight and focused and segment, different audiences need different messages, and I think if you try to bundle everything up and tell the whole story of R&D and NTDs and so on, you'll never get anywhere. Anyway, so I want to bring it to close so people can have a break. The other thing I'd say, I know David well as a great scientist. I didn't realize he was also an expert on branding. The only one thing that struck me is that, of course, the one difference is Coca-Cola and others, it's all about protection of brands. Wouldn't it be great if we got to a point where neglected, if not disease, was no longer needed as a brand? That would be the end goal to focus on. But anyway, thank you all very much. Do please thank our panel.